I'm an American board certified OBGYN, a mom, a Muslim, and I'm talking about sex. This is the Muslim Sex Podcast. Welcome to the Muslim Sex Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sadaf, and this episode is everything you need to know about South Asian health, cardiac health, and what happens to us as we get older for men and for women, and specifically in menopause. So all of that is going to be great stuff. But before I get into it, I want to make a few things clear. One, this is not any type of medical advice. If you have any questions about your health, please go speak with your friendly neighborhood healthcare provider. And if you have any questions about your religion, make sure you go speak with your religious leader. This is a Muslim Sex Podcast because I just happen to be a Muslim woman that talks about sex. And so today I'm super excited to have on with me Dr. Mubin Syed. And Dr. Syed, for those people that may not know who you are or haven't seen your Instagram, which, by the way, I share with everyone in my family and keep telling them more and more about all the things, all the great things that you write about on your Instagram page. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Yes. So my name is Mubin Syed, also known as Desi Doc on Instagram and TikTok. And I am a vascular and interventional radiologist. I've been in practice for 30 years. And of course, of South Asian, Indian heritage. I was actually born in India. And what kind of got me started into all of this is that I would notice in our community that there was a lot of diabetes and heart disease and even premature or sudden cardiac deaths going on. And it was always kind of like somewhat surprising. I kind of thought at first that maybe every community has this, but then I realized that maybe it's particularly more prevalent in the Desi community. And when I thought about that, I thought, well, maybe it's just because these people are just extra unhealthy. Maybe their lifestyle is just particularly unhealthy, and that's what's causing it, is in my mind, I thought. But then what happened is that I had a heart attack, and then all of a sudden everything sort of changed because I was actively trying to be healthy. So I thought, and that sort of basically blew my mind. And I thought, okay, well, wait a minute. If this is happening to me as a physician who's somewhat aware about good health practices. I mean, I was exercising pretty much daily. I was doing like a 5K every other day. I was really very active. And I was able to keep up with my younger son in races. And I just thought, how is this possible? And so that's when I started doing some research, because I thought I was questioning, there's got to be something going on with people of South Asian heritage. And I came across an interesting article that was that South Asian people have like 4 times the rate of heart disease, a similar increased rate of diabetes, and that we had the highest rates of diabetes and heart disease in the world. Or at least one of the highest rates. And it was very, surprising to me. And I thought, why us? Why is it that we're like 60% of the world's cardiovascular disease burden? Even though we're, overall South Asian population is like 25%.
Yeah.
This is more than half of all cardiovascular disease in the world is of South Asian, from South Asian people. Right. So it just, I thought, there had to be a reason for this. It's not just that, it doesn't make sense that somehow we're just predisposed and we just have to accept it. I felt like there had to be, it was like, to me, it was a puzzle. I mean, there had to be an explanation for this. And I really, I came across an article, for instance, that told me that our bodies are physiologically different compared to other people. So it's not just purely lifestyle. Yeah, I mean, lifestyle is part of it, but if you take young, healthy South Asians who are not, unhealthy in any way, they don't have diabetes or even pre-diabetes. They did a study several years ago where they had an equal amount of, people of European or white Caucasian heritage and Desi people or South Asian heritage. They did this controlled study where they had them eat 1.5 cups of cream a day for 5 days.
Hmm.
Nothing
It's a
happened.
lot of cream. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of cream, but it's like ice cream. Let's say you're eating ice cream,
Yeah.
1.5 cups of ice cream every day
Mhm.
for 5 days in a row, every night. It's not like so crazy. Some people do eat ice cream or they eat the equivalent, maybe kulfi or whatever. And you did that every day for 5 days. For the white people, nothing happened. They were
Mm.
fine. They were normal. There was no problem. But every single one of the Desi people became insulin resistant within
Wow.
5 days of eating
Yeah.
that. And I thought, wait a minute, there's like a huge dichotomy here.
Right.
And I was, again, this was like leading me into something. There's got to be something to cause this. Why are we so predisposed? And it's not just because we're smaller, there's something else going on. And it's not because of our lifestyle. It's there, and many other studies that I came across pointed to some unique physiological difference. And one thing I came across was I mentioned earlier the heart disease and diabetes prevalence. I came across a study that was published in Nature about survivors of the Great Chinese Famine from 1958 to 61. This is a huge famine. And when they looked at the survivors of these famines, they looked at not only their children, but also their grandchildren. And they found out that when you survive a single famine, there's something called epigenetics in effect. Genetics, the interpretation of how your body reads the genes, changes, and you become like adapted to starvation as a survival mechanism. It's like our environment can shape the way that our genes are interpreted. And one of the manifestations is that, of course, the people who are exposed in utero would have double the risk of diabetes when they became older, even if they didn't actually, have undergo the famine. But it didn't just affect the children; it affected the grandchildren also. Um, and so this led to me to thinking, oh, wait a minute. Well, let's look into Indian history or South Asian history. And sure enough, I kind of had some familiarity with the Bengal famine of 1943, but it blew me away to find out that there was over 25 famines, probably closer to 36 famines, but at least 25 documented famines where millions of people died. I mean, I'm talking not just millions, I should say tens of millions. It's
Wow.
estimated just between the 40 years of 1880 to 1920,
Uh-huh.
up to 165 million excess deaths
Oh my gosh.
occurred, uh, predominantly due to the famines and the diseases sparked by undernutrition. And I thought, well, this is the smoking gun.
Yeah.
This would explain it. And
Absolutely.
in other populations that have been studied who've undergone famine, there's similar, it just takes one famine to change the risk of diabetes and heart disease. It's all actually in the spectrum, cardiometabolic disease.
Yeah.
And so I wrote a paper on this, all these unique findings that I found where people have been doing studies for years now on this. And it points to a starvation adaptation. But
Hmm.
when you are all of a sudden in an environment of abundance, relative abundance like we are now, it turns into a catastrophe
Sure.
because your body is now programmed to conserve calories, to store fat, and
Mm.
it's maladapted for the current environment. And you can't be eating, huge amounts of refined carbs, for instance, that a lot of Desi people do as part of their natural, or I shouldn't say natural, but it's part of their diet.
Diet. Yeah.
And they don't exercise. I mean, the Muscle study talked self-reported exercise was the lowest amongst all ethnic groups. Um, there's many other, it's a lifestyle issue partially, but it's made worse by the lifestyle issues. But there's an underlying predisposition as well.
So you talk a little bit, you just mentioned you actually mentioned so much. I want to get into all of it because I think it's so
Yeah.
interesting. But so you mentioned, the famines. So I want to get into that because
Mhm.
those were man-made created famines. It
Yes, they
wasn't
were.
that
Uh-huh.
food wasn't available. It was that, that it was restricted, right? By the and
Yeah, that's
I want
exactly right. I mean, billions of pounds. I mean, during the height of the famines, even
yeah,
billions of pounds of food was exported because
yeah,
there was a laissez-faire economic, it's basically, you know, supply and demand. So if a certain place could pay higher for the same food, there was no accountability. They would just, okay, England and Europe can pay higher prices for this food that's grown in India, so give it to the highest bidder.
yeah,
Never matter that agriculture is supposed to serve the local people,
right.
and was there's how they got food. It
Yeah.
became an economic commodity that was hijacked for the purpose of foreign
Yeah.
exchange, basically.
Yeah, so just for those people that may not know what we're talking, so you're talking about the famine that occurred in India and the people that at the time that ruled over India, the time that the famines occurred were the British, right? Is
Yes,
that
this is
correct? It was
during
the British.
colonial period, almost 200 years.
Yeah.
There was a huge number of famines that hasn't happened since independence and didn't occur even before independence.
Hmm.
Before independence, there was about 17 famines in the prior 2,000 years. During British colonial rule, there were at least 25 famines, probably
Hmm.
more,
Yeah.
hundreds of, over 100 million deaths, even in that 40-year period between 1880 and 1920, but of course in the periods before as well. But this is what the records show.
Yeah.
And then only one famine since independence in South Asia, and that, by the way, was also artificial as well.
Yeah. So you were talking about and then for the people that may not know what independence you're talking about the 1947, right?
Yeah,
In
1947
India.
independence. Of course, it varies depending on which nation. I realize that Sri Lankan independence is separate from independence in Nepal, and of course Bangladesh. 1970
Yeah. Yeah.
70s.
Yeah. So this is the kind of the material that you used for your book, which I think is it out on Amazon already? Healing from
Yes,
our
it is. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. The book is called Healing from Our History. Um, and if there's any delays, I mean, sometimes there is some delay in getting these books. You just have to be patient. It may take a couple weeks to get the book,
yeah.
or possibly longer.
Sure. So the Masala study, I know kind of briefly mentioned about different studies, but so the Masala study also revealed some important insights into
Yeah.
South Asian cardiometabolic risk.
Hmm.
So what do you think are the most surprising and underappreciated findings that people, even clinicians, overlook?
Yeah, and that's. I'm glad you brought that up. So, one of the biggest surprises was that BMI,
Yeah.
basal body mass index, doesn't tell the story for South Asians. People who look lean by U.S. standards can still have high amounts of visceral fat and a fatty liver. In fact, South Asians had the highest amount, by the way. And these are two of the strongest predictors for diabetes and heart disease. Another underappreciated fact is that coronary calcium, which is a predictor for heart disease, shows up earlier. And people with normal cholesterol levels and even normal weight can still have plaque, significant amounts of plaque on their scans. And it also means that risk calculators built for the general population often underestimated for South Asians. And because guess what, there was zero South Asians included in the equations that determine these risk calculators. Zero data was used from South Asians, even though we have the highest, by the way, amount of cardiovascular disease in the world. It's not zero South Asia. So basically, these Western medical standards fail us in many ways. But the Masala study was an attempt to put some light onto this, to understand that there are some huge discrepancies in South Asian health. And then, other things that matter are lifestyle, of course, like I mentioned earlier, late dinners, low amounts of resistance training, sleep debt, they were all tied to higher risk. And these are things that are not typically screened in the doctor's examination room. So, you really don't want to just look at the appearance of a South Asian and say, oh, they're probably healthy because they seem lean. It doesn't, if you just look at someone's appearance and they look thin, you'll miss a lot of the problems that are masked, so to speak. By Western medical standards, you think, oh, you
Yeah.
got to be heavy to be unhealthy.
Right, right. So I go on your Instagram and I see that, well, actually just comes up on my feed because I follow you. And I saw that you were talking about BMIs and you were saying that we actually need to be at a lower BMI
That's true. Yeah.
than what is thought to be healthy because of our risk of this cardiometabolic,
Yeah.
risk factors that we have of developing diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol,
Right.
and,
Yeah,
that
they
it's
did. They did a study where they showed at what point, according to BMI, do you start having abnormal? They call it dysglycemia, dyslipidemia, where the lipids become abnormal, or the cholesterol levels and the blood sugar starting to become abnormal. It starts happening after a BMI of greater than or equal to 23.
oh my goodness.
And by the way, if your BMI is 25, that would be considered normal. It would almost be considered obese for South Asians.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So you're overweight if your BMI is over 23, and it is a hard thing to attain. But I mean, I'm just saying it's very hard. But
Yeah.
those are the standards that we need to try to aim for to be healthy.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
of course, waist circumference is another big thing, and it may be actually much more accurate. I would say it's definitely much more accurate than BMI, because BMI actually fails us, as I
Yeah.
mentioned, because of the thin fat, syndrome or phenotype, the appearance of South Asian bodies. We have this thin fat thing where we have very relatively low amounts of lean muscle mass. In fact, one of the lowest amounts of lean muscle mass amongst ethnic groups in the U.S. And at the same time, our bodies are capable of storing much higher amounts of fat inside organs, in between our organs. So it's almost like a hidden fat. And you don't have to be that heavy appearing before you start having problems, health problems.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So, so for women, I feel like it's even harder because as we, are going through perimenopause, menopause, it is so difficult to lose weight. I mean, you hit that phase that estrogen drops and our, cardiovascular risk goes up and this weight gain goes up and it's like a disaster. Even people that weren't diabetic will become diabetic, cholesterol goes up, all this stuff. So what preventative steps, and I actually saw on your social media, because I was kind of on the fence about this creatine. I know I see everybody, all the influencers talking about creatine, 5 grams. It's really important. But I actually didn't listen to any of them. I listened to you because
Uh-huh.
I saw somebody had asked you that question of, whether women should take creatine to increase their muscle mass. And so can you talk to us a little bit about that?
About creatine in general, or about
Creatine and just kind of, about menopause and
yeah.
South Asian women and cardiac risk factors.
Okay, yeah. So regarding creatine, it is definitely something that I would say you probably should check with your physician
Yeah.
about. There's not definitive data on this, in studies, but it is probably, not super. I mean, I think it's relatively safe. I mean, it's pretty well studied in terms of safety, and it may offer protective benefits for cardiometabolic health by improving, glucose and, the lipid metabolism and it supports your vascular function. But these are based, I'm saying this based on the promise of some initial findings. Much of the research is still actually preliminary. More large-scale human trials are probably needed for definitive conclusions. But some of the smaller studies show that it is promising. It can improve your glucose sensitivity, for instance. That, of course, is a predisposer. If you have bad sugar control or glucose control, it is a predisposition for heart disease. Also, there's a potential benefit for lipid levels, modest though, and it is based on relatively small study, but there was an older study that was done in men and women with high cholesterol, and it reported significant reductions in triglycerides and the VLDL cholesterol. So, there may be some decrease in total cholesterol levels in patients who have high levels, but the studies are relatively small and may not even be consistent yet. We'd still need like huge, large scale trials to do this. And then there's some studies that show that arterial health may be benefited by creatine. And that's also interesting and exciting. It reduces, it may dilate some of the larger vessels and improve the function of the smaller or micro vessels. And this can, reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. There's also, it is like a direct and indirect antioxidant. And so it can protect your cells and DNAs from damage from what are called free radicals. And therefore, it can also allow for anti-inflammatory effects that, of course, is linked with cardiovascular disease. And then, high levels of homocysteine, which is, a type of protein that's found in the blood, people who are predisposed to cardiovascular disease. Creatine can actually help lower these levels, although, again, it's not definitive. The trials have been somewhat inconsistent, but, it's in some ways, I don't think it's harmful, but you probably want to check with your doctor. But there have been some smaller scale studies that have shown that it can be helpful. And of course, you want to make sure that if you have pre-existing high blood pressure or kidney disease, that you check with your physician in particular, or any type of water retention. That's another caution, because it can cause a temporary increase in water retention. But the initial human trials show promise. Larger long-term randomized controlled trials are needed to confirm the effects. But I think it is safe. It is pretty affordable, and 3 to 5 grams per day is what's recommended for promoting the health benefits, and it's safe and well tolerated by most people. But just check with your physician.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of circling back to, thank you so much for that creatine, because I think that's really important. And a lot of people are asking about it and more people are starting to use it. So it's really important to know kind of, what the data says. And then of course you have to check with your doctor before you take anything, just to make sure that it's
Yeah.
safe for you as a, specific person. But it's good to know that there are, some studies that say it can be helpful. So,
Right.
you probably see women, I'm sure, but as just like we mentioned earlier, as women hit menopause, their risk of heart disease increases sharply. And I think that it's almost like, we get like a double whammy being South Asians, right?
True.
Because we're South Asian, we already have that higher
Mhm.
risk due to our genetics. And then as we lose the protective effects of estrogen, our heart risk definitely goes up. What do you think, what preventative steps do you think people should take as South Asian women?
That's a great question. So just like you mentioned, estrogen is protective, but it helps with healthy cholesterol and keeps vessels flexible, and it supports how your body handles glucose. And then when it drops after menopause, your fat shifts to the abdomen,
Yeah.
insulin resistance rises, blood pressure and cholesterol climb, etc. And for South Asian women, like you mentioned, the slope is even steeper, meaning they often start with more visceral fat
Yep.
and less muscle mass. And so the transition accelerates their risk. And that's why prevention has to begin before menopause. And I would say things like resistance training, 2 to 3 days a week, daily walking, prioritizing protein at every meal, getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep, checking your lipids and your hemoglobin A1C, which is a test of your blood sugar control regularly. And I think those are some things that can be helpful as preventing your cardiovascular risk. It's also important to talk about menopause therapy openly with patients. And I know as an OBGYN you would do that, but I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
it's for the right indication, I think hormone therapy can be part of a personalized prevention plan as well.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. Yes.
yep. So menopause isn't the cliff. Losing muscle and sleep is. Train, eat protein, and protect your rest.
Okay. Yeah, no, those are great, great suggestions because I think that so many of us, we think that, there's nothing that can be done, as we approach menopause. And I know that, there's a huge stigma in our culture, right? I mean, there's so many things we don't talk about. Women don't talk about,
Mhm.
we don't really talk about periods. We don't talk about, menopause. We don't talk about reproductive health. We definitely don't talk about sexual health. And so I think that because we have so many taboos and stigmas, I think it's very, very difficult for women to get this type of information, right? So I think that, they suffer in silence. A lot of women that go through menopause that are South Asians, we experience brain fog, all the same symptoms, right? Hot flashes, night sweats, mood swings, all of those things, increase in diabetes, heart risk, all of that. And yet, there aren't that many people addressing our health concerns. And so it's hard for these women to find help. And so, absolutely. I mean, I think that, being South Asian, it is really, really important. I mean, I started to learn more about this as I, read the masala study and went into it. And then, of course, following your Instagram page, I think is so, so helpful. And of course, we'll mention and we'll put the links in our podcast for your Instagram and TikTok. But,
Thank
I
you.
think that
Appreciate that.
yeah, but I think that it's really, really important to get, important like evidence-based, science-backed research
Mhm.
information, right, from people that you can trust. So, we talked a little bit about loss of muscle mass, and you mentioned that. I know that in midlife, we know that it contributes to insulin resistance, a cardiometabolic disease. And you also mentioned about resistance training. So you said about what, 2 to 3 days of resistance training? And when you talk about resistance training, what exactly do you mean? Do you mean like lifting heavy weights? What do you refer?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be, heavy weights. I mean, squats, pushes, pulls, carries. It can be with whatever weight can be tolerated. Even like sitting up and down in a chair, if you can tolerate with some weights up and down and maybe lifting them above your head if you can. They don't have to be big weights. Just doing this regularly. And we talked about squats, lunges, and they can really help a lot. And we know that squats can even help acutely to drop your blood sugar,
Oh, I didn't know that. Tell
especially
me about
after a
that.
meal. Yeah. There was a study done recently that found that doing, I think it was, I don't know the exact numbers, like 10 to 15 squats, probably closer to 12 squats, I should say, is equivalent to walking for 30 minutes,
No
brisk
way.
walking for 30 minutes. Yeah.
Wow. Is that with or without a weight?
That's without a weight, just body weight squat.
Unreal. Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that like every day now.
Yeah, especially after you eat, if you
Yeah,
you know if you feel
unreal.
like your blood sugar is a little high, maybe, or uh,
Yeah.
are you
Yeah.
getting a little sleepy after a meal in particular? If that's a sign
Right,
that
right,
your
right.
blood sugar
Yes.
might be high, even if
Yeah.
you're healthy, by the way, and not diabetic.
So important to do those squats. I had no idea. This is
Mhm.
great information. So, what do you think was the most humbling lesson you learned in your career about the link between culture and cardiovascular disease?
Um, yeah, it's. I think one thing is that advice falls flat if it doesn't follow culture. You know,
Mm,
you
I
know,
love that. Yeah.
Yeah, we would, always tell patients, hey, I shouldn't say patients, but it's not necessarily patients, like people that I know that have asked me, what do you do for, um, you know, I would say, well, you want to reduce your rice intake, walk more, and people would say, okay, they would understand, but things wouldn't necessarily change
Right.
because it has to really make sense to people with their culture and with what they usually are already doing. So you want to incorporate it into your family routine, for instance, because that's a big thing in South Asian families. South Asian culture is family, religious practices, food traditions, and that's really the way you have to do it. You don't want to fight culture or traditions, and you want to actually use the people's culture of South Asian culture as a solution. In fact, um, and what I mean is, you want to have shared meals. This should be incorporated into prayer or cultural dance, for instance. Um, and you got to try to find a way to use this as a bridge rather than as a barrier. Um,
Yeah.
and like if you're family walks, for instance, after dinner,
Yeah.
and eating, um, maybe trying to reduce portion size, but keep the good part of what you're eating. Don't abandon it. Keep the lentils. Maybe add more legumes. Try to increase protein intake, and there's ways of doing that, even if you're vegetarian, of course. And incorporate uh, your cultural activities as a way of, like a lot of people are into dance, and you can do that, or even yoga is a pretty sound way to not only improve your muscle strength, but it's culturally appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah. We used to, when I was little, we used to go for walks with my parents, and I used to really enjoy that. And I know that's a big thing, in like the Pakistani community. Even when I used to visit
Yeah,
Pakistan, people would go like after dinner to go for a walk, right? Like
it's
everyone
the
would
best
go.
time to do it in terms of for your health,
Yeah.
because it really can calm down a glucose spike.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's such a great idea. And I like how you say to incorporate the culture into the mindfulness with the eating and with trying to maintain portion control and things like that. And
Yeah.
oftentimes we think of like diets as like limiting or restrictive, right? But I like
Hmm.
how you say to embrace it. Like you don't have to give up everything, right?
Right.
Oftentimes we think that we go all the way like 180 degrees. We're like, okay, I'm not going to do any more red meat. I'm not going to do any more of
Yeah.
this. I really want to protect my heart health and this and that.
Hmm.
And I like the fact that you say, everything can be done in moderation, right? You
Right.
don't have to give up everything so
You don't have to
quickly.
give it up totally. I would say, like you're saying, just keep it in moderation.
Yeah.
Perhaps instead of white rice, go for brown rice.
Yeah.
White rice, by the way, is it's an introduced food during colonial period.
Tell me about that.
That's something that was sort of interesting to me. But what happened was that during the colonial period, it was introduced in the late 1800s, and it became part of the South Asian diet. Whereas before, South Asians ate hand pounded brown rice. And white rice, of course, it's devoid of its nutrients, and it's basically like it's got a very high glycemic index. It really jacks up your blood sugar, and it can keep it jacked up for a very long time. And same thing with white flour. That these are somewhat unnatural to the traditional South Asian diet, which was based on yes, some rice, brown rice, but also it had the nutrients. Brown rice has all the nutrients. During the colonial period, there was an epidemic of a disease called a beriberi, and the colonial administration thought it was due to a tropical disease of some type. Little did they know that it was actually because they had introduced white rice into the diet, and it
Oh,
became
wow.
so overwhelmingly popular that it it caused epidemics of this disease caused by a vitamin deficiency, uh, thiamine, and it was causing basically deaths. Uh, but the government did not want to reveal that because the rice mills were all owned by the colonial, you know, powers that be. And so, because the British owned the rice mills and they could charge double for white rice compared to, unrefined brown rice.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I didn't know any of that.
Yeah. By the way, millets. If you can get a hold of millets, they are actually healthier. That was actually part of the original South Asian diet as well.
Really?
Even
What,
potentially
what's
more
a
common
millet?
than rice. A millet like jawar, bajra, these are like they're actually in the grass. They're a type of grass. They're they're actually grains, but they don't have gluten in them. And it's what was eaten throughout South Asia uh, very much, especially before the introduction of white rice.
So interesting. So we know that sexual health is often left out of the health conversation, definitely for South Asians, and but we know that intimacy and cardiovascular risk are very closely linked. What's one of the ways that you counsel patients about this, intersection?
Yeah. So I will say up front that I'm not actually this is not my area of
Okay.
specialty,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
I do have patients that as part of their cardiovascular health,
Of course.
we do talk to them, and I think it's important to realize that intimacy is a form of physical activity, and it's roughly equivalent to climbing a couple flights of stairs.
Oh,
If you can
I didn't
walk
know that.
brisk, yeah, if you can walk briskly without chest pain or shortness of breath, sex is generally safe. But of course, clear it with your physician. Of course, if you have a
Right.
strong
Yeah,
heart history. Um, but also, sexual health is a window into vascular health.
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, erectile dysfunction or low arousal, these two different things, can be early signs of dysfunction of the blood vessels.
Heart disease, yeah.
And it's the same process that drives heart disease, exactly, like you're saying.
Yeah.
So instead of treating it as a separate issue, um, you could tell patients that improving exercise, blood pressure, cholesterol, glucose, and sleep will improve not only your heart health, but also your intimacy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
So
fantastic.
basically, whatever helps your arteries actually can help your bedroom.
Yeah, that's I like that. Yeah, I've never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. It so does. So now if you could design the ideal South Asian heart health checklist, what three things would you emphasize and what would be on there?
Um, well, I mean, first thing is measure your waistline.
Mm. So what's a good waistline? Can you tell us that like
Yeah,
for men and then for women?
yeah. So for South Asians in particular, the International Diabetes Federation
Yeah.
(IDF) has actually said that it for South Asian men the waist circumference should be 90 centimeters or less, which is 35.4 inches. And for women, it should be 80 centimeters or less, which is 31.5 inches.
Okay.
And so that's one thing. Or some other people. This is the most studied, and that's why the International Diabetes Federation actually suggests that in their guidelines that you should try to maintain that because once you get above that, that's when you start predisposing your body to metabolic syndrome, um, and which is like pre-diabetes basically. And another alternative, which is not as well studied, but it has been recommended in some papers that I've come across, is that maintaining your waist to height ratio less than or equal to zero point 0.5.
0.5.
So,
Okay.
so we were talking about waist to height ratio, basically your waist circumference,
Yeah.
and dividing that by your total height. Your waist circumference should be less than half of your height, if that makes sense.
Oh, yes. Yes, it does.
Okay.
So I'm just thinking, is that like, does it matter what unit you use? Like, is it like
No, for that
centimeter?
ratio, it doesn't matter.
Right, right.
And
Because they
that's why I'm
should,
trying to give you both inches and centimeters, because I know you have an international audience. But it's, 80 centimeters is 31.5 inches for women. For men, it's 90 centimeters, which is 35.4 inches. Um, and that's what's recommended. But the problem is it doesn't correct for height, but it's still considered, for most Desi people, it is pretty accurate. And that's why it's the most well studied, by the way. So I would say that's probably the best way to be careful. Okay, so that's one thing, because BMI misses too much on South Asia. A lot of people use BMI. Yes, BMI 223 is bad, but it misses too much because you can have a normal BMI and still have a lot of belly fat and a lot of fat in your liver, and you're going to miss it on someone
yeah.
who's got the thin fat phenotype where all their fat is stored in their belly, and you're not
Mm,
measuring their waist circumference. The other thing is number two, protect your muscle mass.
mm.
Aim for resistance training at least twice a week, and about 1 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight daily, unless it's contraindicated because of some reason. It might be because of kidney disease or whatever. And then number three, I would say treat, for women in particular, treat your reproductive history as your cardiology history. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, like if you've had a history of gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, or
yeah.
early menopause, it should trigger earlier heart screening and prevention.
Mm, yeah. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so basically, measure your waist, build the muscle, and respect women's uh, history as heart history. Their
Yeah.
gynecological history.
And do your 12 squats after you eat food.
Yes, keep up with the. I mean, that's a form of resistance exercise, so
Yeah.
it's important.
Yeah, you did this one thing on Instagram. It was showing if you could get up off the floor
Right.
without using your hands. Talk to me a little bit about that. Because, by the way, I can do that, but no one else in my family, like my
Yes.
husband or my kids, can do that. So I feel so
Right.
proud.
I
But
mean, so it's great that you can do that, but it's something that there was an article written about this that it is a predictor of your longevity, I believe. And it's been a while since I've actually read that article, so I have to
yeah,
go back to
yeah,
it. But
yeah.
but for the greatest health and quality of life, and also for it corresponds to longevity, I guess, for the next.
Oh,
And I have to look this up because I will have
yeah,
to.
yeah. No, no
I'm not
worries.
sure 100%. But the study found that if you can get up without using your hands from a sitting cross-legged position, basically on the
Yeah,
floor,
yeah.
that correlates with a high quality, I guess, high health standard and longevity.
I wonder why that is.
It's
Oh,
because you're starting to lose balance and coordination. It sort of predicts a earlier death,
oh
which
gosh.
is which is horrible to say this, but if you can practice, and it's something that you can actually overcome by doing things
Yeah,
like resistance training, for instance, and balance type exercises. You can actually learn to overcome this and actually train your body to get up without touching your hands to
yeah,
the ground. If that is the ideal, to be able to do that. Now, even if you have to touch lightly to the ground with one hand, that still counts. It's like a varying scale. Touching your hand, or maybe getting up with two hands, or using your knees. All of that counts as like a point. So the more points you have, and the harder it is for you to get up without doing these extra maneuvers. Um, that's worse for you compared to if you can
mm.
just get up without touching anything to the ground. Either
I'm
leg.
well, now I have something to brag about during dinner.
Yeah, yeah, right. And
Um,
even for balance, like if you can stand on one leg, for instance, for the longer you can do that with your eyes open, it's the better you are. Those are just things that you can practice to help yourself, because that is one of the major risks to people are falls basically when you're not as prepared because you don't have the balance and the strength and the you know coordination to avoid these falls.
Yeah, and yoga is great for that,
It
right?
is for sure, and this is
Yeah.
again part of what I'm saying is a lot of times you can just return to your roots and practice these things. Yoga is great for balance and flexibility and strength, and even for reducing stress, because that's another big problem in the South Asian community, is that there is often inordinate amounts of stress for various reasons, and if we could, this is known that practicing yoga and also meditation is very beneficial in reducing your stress levels. And even the basic thing of yoga is pranayama, where you just take a breath in with and blow it out. Um, that's been shown instantaneously to reduce your blood pressure by around 10 points. Yeah, it's all discoveries that were made thousands of years ago in in South Asia, and they're only now people are rediscovering
Right.
this.
Right. Yeah. So what's one South Asian food you can't live without? Have you found like a heart healthy snack for it? What's your guilty pleasure?
Yeah, so I mean, I enjoy biryani a lot,
Okay. Yeah.
but it can be very unhealthy, as you know. Um, it can be made with brown rice, by the way, and still be delicious, and probably won't. I mean, it won't raise your blood sugar. Of course, you want to eat all of these in moderation. I'm not saying you should be eating like the same amount.
Yeah.
Probably, be careful about portion size and maybe, you know, no more than a cup, I would say, of rice, even if it's brown rice, by the way. And vegetable biryani can be quite delicious,
Okay.
and it can be very good. Use vegetables and chickpeas, but still has the same spices and aromatics, and you know that could be one way around it. Smarter macros, same aroma.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, bulgur tastes really good too. We
Mhm.
making plow or something like that with that.
Yeah,
That's
and we're
that's
kind of delving into millet, by the way,
yeah,
trying to add that more into our diet.
that's amazing.
Yeah,
So if you weren't so you are interventional cardiologist, is that right?
I'm an interventional radiologist, by the way, so it's
Interventional
outside the
radiologist.
heart, but
Got
we
it.
have a lot of the same problems because it's vascular disease has a lot of
Yeah.
intersection with cardiac disease, as you can imagine. That's why it's actually called cardiovascular disease. So it is very similar. There's a huge interplay.
Yeah. So if you weren't an interventional radiologist, then
Mhm.
what do you think you would have done in medicine or really outside of medicine, whatever? Like if you weren't a physician, what would you be?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. I've thought about this multiple times, and I think I would really enjoy being a history teacher.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I can see that.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated, about connecting the past to the present,
Yeah.
and just with archives instead of arteries.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I would trade a cath lab for a classroom.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see you doing that. Maybe that's something you do in retirement or something,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I mean, it's sort of like I combined it in my book, as you know.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
basically trying to explain, connecting the dots between the health crisis and our
Yeah.
history, which is,
Yeah.
by the way, unknown to most people, even if they've grown up
Oh,
in
I didn't.
these South Asian countries. It's not
Yeah.
even part of the textbooks. I was actually surprised to find this out. The famines
Wow.
are hardly ever mentioned.
Wow. Why? Well, my question is like, who wrote the textbooks, right?
That's
And
true.
where did they come from?
Exactly. It's all been whitewashed out,
Yeah.
unfortunately and
Yeah.
tragically. So people
Yeah.
don't even know their own history.
Absolutely. I
And
didn't I
there's-
didn't know any of the history. So I'm really grateful for
yeah.
all the work you did because you really dug it up and it's been so great to listen to you. So just a quick fire question. What do you think? Yoga or weights?
I would say weights with yoga for recovery. If
Mm,
that's probably what I would do if there's a way to combine it.
yeah.
Because there is a great, restorative yoga is wonderful.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. 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 There's a class I've taken in the past that would combine yoga and weights. which was
Nice.
interesting.
Okay, yeah. So that would be the ideal combination if that's uh,
Yeah.
what you think.
What about Bollywood dance or treadmill?
I would say Bollywood dance because, frankly, it's interval training disguised as joy.
You're right. You're right. Those Bollywood dances. There's so much choreography that goes into it, right? And
Yeah,
you've probably done like some Bollywood dancing at like Mandy's, weddings and
a
stuff like
little
that,
bit.
right?
Yeah, and my son loves it, and he's a master at it.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, that's he's been an inspiration for me.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And last question, chai with sugar or black coffee?
Um, I would say masala chai with minimal sugar but extra ginger probably would be the
Oh,
best way to do it. Maybe you can even add, yeah, I would say extra ginger. Maybe a way to get away with less sugar.
oh, that's great. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't drink any caffeine, which
Mhm.
is strange for a South Asian, but I don't
By the
drink
way,
it.
I'm in the same boat. I actually
Oh,
am. In
yeah.
fact, I just started trying some masala chai recently, and I found it to be very delicious. And surprisingly, my dentist, who is actually of South Asian heritage, she noticed it. She said, "What's been going on? How come your teeth have like a slight tinge to them? Have you been drinking tea or coffee?" And I was like, "Yeah, you caught me. I started drinking a little bit, but it's only every now and then. I'm
Yeah.
not doing this on a daily basis." And there's actually a local chai place that opened up, a Desi chai place,
Yeah.
and we've been trying their masala chais, and it's
Oh, that sounds
occasionally,
awesome.
by the way. But I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm a no caffeine person. I kind of grew up in a
Same.
relatively caffeine free household.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm the same way, caffeine free, and that's what I've made my kids too. And so they don't
Mhm.
drink any caffeine.
Now,
So
and,
just
and I know there's studies showing that caffeine can actually be good for you and this and that, but I just have not been able to get into it. Other than, of course, chocolate. I really enjoy
yeah.
chocolate, and then we talked about chai.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
it's some
Absolutely.
the occasional coffee if it's got a lot of cream in it, which I don't. I don't drink this regularly at all. Probably
Yeah.
once every several months or something like that.
Yeah. Sure. Well, this has been so fantastic. So, for all those people that are out there that are thinking, wow, Dr. Mubin Syed has so much information, he is so smart.
Uh,
Where can people find you? Where can they get your book? How can they get in touch?
yeah, thanks
You can
so
let
much
us know.
for asking. Well, the book is available on in any of the major booksellers,
Okay.
Amazon.
I'm going to order mine today.
Thanks, thank you. It may take a few weeks to get it, just so you know. Even if it
No worries.
says it's out of stock, don't be discouraged. It
Okay.
will come. You can order it through Amazon. You can also order it through Barnes and Noble, and then Books a Million actually has, and you can actually go to, we have a website called Desi Doc that actually talks about all the sites.
Oh, okay. Great.
It's if you search on Google for Desi Doc, there's actually a little website. This is in addition to the Instagram where you can also find how to order the book.
Okay. Great. Great.
Yeah, so that would be a way to do it. And of course, you can follow me on Instagram. And if you have any questions, you can direct message me, and I'll try to get back to you. Sometimes I'm going to be a little behind, as you know.
I know, but it's
um,
okay. I was persistent.
yep, and thank you. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
can you spell out your handle name just so people can remember how to look
yeah,
it up?
it's Desi, it's DESIDOC.MD.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, this has been such a great conversation. It's so enlightening. I love it. Um,
Thank you so much for
I,
having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
yeah, no, I mean, it's
It's
such an
been my
important
mission to, I mean, and similar to yours, just to let people know that, you do have to be extra careful as a person of, South Asian or Desi heritage. You can't just take the example of people around you. Just because they're doing ice cream every night does't mean you can get away with it. Your bodies are different and you have to be extra careful.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that's, a great way to end it because I think that It's important, right? And that's why we have precision medicine. And that's why it's so important for physicians to be culturally
Hmm.
competent, right? Especially when they're counseling patients and South Asians, as I'm learning, and mind
Yeah,
you, in my own journey, is that we really have our own cardiometabolic risk that is, much greater than the average population. And so our
yeah,
health, our healthcare providers really have to know and understand that so they can best guide us. And,
true.
finding resources such as you online, I think has been so helpful. And I always send all your Instagram reels to my family because,
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Yeah,
yeah,
hopefully I can
so,
help. And I did want to actually add one more thing is that
yeah,
talking about cardiometabolic health, to maintain the same amount of cardiometabolic health as someone who's, for instance, of Caucasian heritage, white Caucasian European heritage, um, people of South Asian heritage may actually need to exercise a lot more
yeah,
to maintain the same amount of health. I'm talking about moderate intensity exercise. Its studies have shown between 232 to 266 minutes of moderate intensity exercise in a week compared to the
wow,
150 minutes that's recommended for the general population.
oh my
To maintain
God.
this equivalent amount, it's almost twice, I know. And I
I,
think it's really surprising, and I couldn't believe the difference. But especially because South Asians as a group, not talking about individuals, but as a group, according to the Masala study, they report the lowest amounts of exercise of any ethnicity.
yeah, that's just crazy. I'm just thinking about like how many hours I'm going to have to spend on the Peloton, just to get this like,
Yeah,
do you,
exercise is not a choice now.
yeah,
It's something that you have to do to maintain.
yeah.
I mean, if you're serious about maintaining health, and it's
Oh,
because our bodies are designed to be much more. I think it's part of the unique adaptation that South Asians have had to endure. Learning about our history is that South Asia was the wealthiest area part of the world. 25% of the world's GDP originated, which is like one out of every $4, in the world came out of South Asia. Um, it was a manufacturing powerhouse. It was, a huge economic powerhouse. And within a period of almost 200 years, it was reduced to the poorest place on earth, literally. There was so much exploitation that happened, economic destruction, impoverishment, where poverty rates skyrocketed to like over 90%, rates that had never been seen prior or since in Indian history.
that's
And
crazy.
$66 trillion of wealth was removed out of South Asia.
Yeah, it's in the British Museum.
Right. But I mean, basically, India developed the Western world with all of
Yeah,
that wealth. The Industrial Revolution was possible because of the stolen Indian wealth. That's what's crazy. It's the cheap capital was possible because it was basically removed out of South Asia. And that's why factories could be built, and all this economic activity, it was like a windfall. And whereas the same activity was pretty much blocked in South Asia. And India was actually deindustrialized, and that's why words like for instance, textile words that we take for granted are actually of South Asian origin. Words like dungaree, cummerbund, that's actually an Indian word. Shawl, cotton, khaki. These are all words for a reason. Calico, I mean, chintz, all of this stuff originated from South Asia. It's an economic powerhouse. I mean, shipbuilding was like the best in the world.
mhm,
The designs were copied, which is why the uh, the British Navy ended up being the best, is because they basically prevented the shipbuilding in South Asia, but they utilized the same designs and were able to build the best ships. Even the reason that the British Army was the best was because the gunpowder was made from India.
unreal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
surprising facts. And India had like this amazing public education system that was dismantled, um,
Mm,
etc.
unfortunate.
things I
unfortunately.
write about in our book, in the book that.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't wait to read it. I mean, gosh, there's so much history there. And I always feel like, you really can't understand anything about like a nation or people without understanding their history, right? And where they came from. I mean, we know that like South Asians were very sex positive, and you had so much like talk, and Muslims were very sex positive, even Islam is very sex positive, right?
Mhm.
We know that. But what happened, right? Same thing, we had colonialism come over to South Asia, and the puritanical rule, and then all of a sudden, right, sex was seen as dirty, wrong, shameful, taboo, and then we inherited those values, and then all of a sudden it became wrong and taboo for us, and all of a sudden so many people are sex negative, and it's unfortunate. And I honestly, I didn't even know that Islam was sex positive because I grew up, very sex negative. And so
Mhm.
when I learned that, it blew my mind. I was like, there is no way. What the heck are you talking about? When I
Yeah,
looked,
it's surprising, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then I learned our history, and, that women have sexual rights in Islam and this and that. And I
Hmm.
was like, I had no idea. I didn't know about any of this. So, that's why I thought it was really important to, empower and educate and advocate, and people that
That's really great what you're doing. That's a great thing that you're doing.
yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Well, thank you again. Thank you so much for coming on. You were amazing. And I can't wait to
And
read your
so are
book.
you, by the way. So
Uh, so everyone remember, the book is called Healing from Our History, and there's so much that you're going to learn from that book. So make sure you get your copy today. And well, we are done here. And until next time, this is Muslim Sex Podcast. So thank you for listening to the podcast, and make sure you leave us a review, share and like the podcast. And if you leave me a review, I'd love to shout you out on social media. So be sure that you share it with all your friends. And thanks for listening.